Hi, my name's Bessie and I'm studying for a DPhil in psychiatry, which is another name for a PhD. Psychiatry broadly is the study of the brain when it goes a bit wrong, and it can lead to mental health problems like depression, anxiety, OCD, and schizophrenia. During a DPhil, it's very common to focus on one type of disorder, and so I focus on depression. At the moment, there's several different ways of treating depression. Somebody might get a talking therapy, for example, like cognitive behavioural therapy, or they might be prescribed antidepressant medication. The problem at the moment is that when people are prescribed medication, quite often it can't suit them. So they might have really unwanted side effects. They might have nausea, headaches, and they might have trouble thinking. As well as that, the medication might not work very well for them, so it might not be very effective at reducing their symptoms of depression. And that's where my team comes in. So, what we're trying to do is tailor antidepressant medication to individual people so that it's more effective for them and it reduces any kind of side effects that they don't want. And the way that we do that is to ask people what side effects they want to avoid, and also to use data and information that we already have about that type of person. So, for example, how other people have reacted to that medication based on their age and gender. And we do all of this using something called artificial intelligence, which is just a fancy way of saying that we use computers and algorithms and data and information to try and put all these things together and find the best treatment for that person. So, how did I develop my research questions and how did I narrow them down? Well, when I joined my team and project, the people who run it, so my bosses, already had quite a good idea as to what type of research questions they wanted answering for the broader project. And they were looking to bring on board a PhD student who already had a lot of the skills and experience required to answer these questions. My research questions really focus on the patients who take the antidepressant medication for depression, as well as the doctors and psychiatrists who prescribe them. And what I'm really concerned with is what people think about using artificial intelligence tools in a doctor's surgery. And this might be, for example, using an app which tells them that a particular type of medication will be best suited to them. And in terms of research question, I'm concerned with whether they are comfortable using this type of app and what they'd like to see on it. So, for example, is there a particular colour scheme they'd like? Is there a particular way of phrasing questions that they feel more comfortable with? And does the app contain enough information for them to make informed decisions? I'm also really interested in what clinicians, so doctors and psychiatrists, think about using apps, whether it helps them as a doctor or whether they think that it interferes in some way. So, for example, does it make the decision making process more difficult? Do they feel that it's challenging their authority? And so, those are my broad research questions. The way that I've narrowed them down to be a bit more specific and answerable is through an awful lot of reading. Quite often you spend the first year of your DPhil reading things like scientific journals, books, and newspaper articles. And I've had to spend a lot of time looking at press releases and newspaper articles because a lot of the research that's being done in this area of new technology is actually coming out of big companies, for example, in the US, in Silicon Valley. And so they might not necessarily be reported on in traditional places like scientific journals. So I'm now 9 months into my research journey. Since the start of my PhD, my research questions have definitely evolved and changed as a result of the reading that I've been doing. Quite often, when you're reading, you find new ideas, new ways of thinking about things, and new elements that need looking at that you hadn't thought of before. So, for example, in my reading, I found that quite often certain groups in the UK and in the world aren't very well represented in the data that we're collecting about people. on depression. So, for example, if you're a woman or if you belong to an ethnic minority, then you're quite likely to not have the same amount of data collected about you as a white male from the UK, for example. And the problems that this can cause is that it can mean that the apps and other artificial intelligence tools that we're building are based around a very specific type of person. So, for example, a white male. And it's not really reflective of everybody in society, and it means that it might not work very well for them. And that's a big problem when we're trying to make a tool that personalizes treatment to individual people. And so, one new research question that I'm looking at is how, and if we can, develop artificial intelligence tools such as apps to be more inclusive and fair, and to include data and information on people from a broad range of groups, as many as humanly possible, really. My research questions have also changed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Because a lot of what I'm researching involves talking to patients and doctors in person, I've had to think about the different kinds of methodologies I'll be using. So, when I say methodology, I mean the types of ways I'm going to collect data. It might not be physically possible for me to go into a doctor's surgery now and to talk to patients and doctors. And so I'm having to rethink how I do that. And it may be the case that I will have to do things online. And it may be that I might have to change my research questions to something that I can collect data more easily for as well.